My name is Karla Montes, and I will be walking you through Chapter 4, The Public's View on Science. This chapter focuses on the public's perception of science, using biotechnology and the life sciences as an example. So what is biotechnology? It is defined as the use of biological processes, organisms, or systems to manufacture products intended to improve quality of human life. Basically, genetically modified organisms. However, as we are all aware, like other advanced technologies, biotechnology has a potential for misuse and public concern. Since 1975, when it was first discovered, scientists have had concern about the potential and unknown health and safety issues of this new technology. However, the economic benefits became the focal point. 49% of the European public saw genetic research as an unacceptable risk and demonstrated concern about synthetic food, also known as genetically modified foods. Public concern and warning signals were pushed aside. The Life Sciences Project, embracing medical, pharmaceutical, industrial, and agri-food technologies, gained the support of the regulators and the market forces. The public had been concerned since the early 70s when biotechnology first developed. This unease grew in the 90s when mad cow disease hit Europe. This was clearly a consequence on human action. Consequently, and understandably, the public lost confidence in farming, in scientific expertise, and regulators. Then, in 1996, we see the first shipment of Monsanto's genetically modified soya in Europe enter the food chain, and the activists rose in protest about the environmental impacts of genetically modified foods and the lack of food labeling across these products. Later, in 1997, there was a powerful whirlpool of media coverage on the first cloning on a living organism. Research then showed the health risks to rats that were fed genetically modified food, and this began a whirlwind of protests and boycotts on the commercialization of genetically modified crops across the European Union. So why should the public be taken seriously? Because in order for these life sciences companies to succeed, they must understand and gain the trust of the public. What history has taught life science companies is that technological innovation is a societal process, where success is dependent on reaction of those directly affected, potential consumers, voting citizens, politicians, mass media, civil society organizations. Furthermore, they must invest in heavy research on the aforementioned extra market forces. In order to understand public perception, is public understanding of science, PUS research. Significant research in the UK and the US have helped understand public perception since 1979. These research companies aim to learn consumer patterns, trends, and opinions. For example, Eurobarometer surveys address topics of science and technology and life sciences. In 2010, it provided trends on technological optimism, perceptions of genetically modified food, regenerative medicine including human embryonic stem cell research, and research on trust in the various companies of developing, exploiting, and regulating biotechnology. In order for a survey sample to adequately represent the population from which it is drawn, it needs to be selected using a formal sampling procedure. Surveys should be based on a form of random selection. Surveys can give researchers and the life sciences some direction and insight to the public's mind. However, there is always new technological developments which will bring uncertainty to both researchers and consumers. In order to understand public uncertainty, we take a look at Ellsberg paradox. It is a paradox in decision theory. The basic idea is that people overwhelmingly prefer taking on risk in situations where they know specific odds rather than an alternative risk scenario in which the odds are completely ambiguous. That is, given a choice of risks to take, such as bets, people prefer the devil they know, rather than assuming a risk where odds are difficult or impossible to calculate. Another theory that helps us understand consumers is Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory. The theory states that people make decisions based on the potential value of losses and gains rather than the final outcome, and that people evaluate these losses and gains using certain simple, efficient rules. So how does the public engage with science? Two ways in which the public participates are through subjective and objective competence. Subjective competence is the extent to which people are interested and feel well informed about science. Objective competence is reflected in knowledge of basic scientific facts. Ethical concerns vary from regions of the world, depending on culture, religion, and moral upbringing. Some countries tend to prioritize ethics over science versus others who prioritize science over ethics. Some have concerns over benefits and risk, while others carry concerns about distributional fairness. Chapter 6. Not 100% sure. The public understanding of risk. When you think about risks, you might agree that it is defined as a situation involving exposure to danger. According to Adams, there are different kinds of risks. Some are visible to the naked eye and we use judgment. These are risks perceived directly. Risks that are perceived through science are those involving quantified assessment, and so the uncertainties derive from numbers and probabilities. Other risks, such as virtual risks, may or may not be real, but beliefs about them have real consequences. So these judgments cannot be validated, and since science can't settle the issue, people argue from their own beliefs, convictions, and prejudices. According to Adams, there are different kinds of risks. Some are visible to the naked eye, and we use judgment. These are risks perceived directly. Risks that are perceived through science are those involving quantified assessment, and so the uncertainties derive from numbers and probabilities. Other risks, such as virtual risks, may or may not be real, but beliefs about them have real consequences. So these judgments cannot be validated since science can't settle the issues. People argue from their own beliefs, convictions, and prejudices. Propensity leads to risk-taking behavior that leads to accidents. You learn through this kind of risk from acquired perception once you overcome the accidents. Risk compensation is scanning the environment for safety and danger and modifying the behavior in response to what's observed. Risk-averse are those devoted to preventing bad things from happening. An example: mortgage brokers. According to Adams, there are many different types of public, and they perceive and respond differently to uncertainty. The individualists are self-made people, free from control by theories, and strive to exert control over their environment. They are enthusiasts for equality and opportunity and feel the need for moral justification. According to Adams, these are prone to loop bias. Egalitarians have strong group loyalties, but little respect for externally imposed rules other than those imposed by nature. They are advocates of the precautionary principle and prone to bottom loop bias. Hierarchists inhibit a world with strong group boundaries. People are placed on a hierarchy, and all participating members know their place. They believe nature has to be managed. The fatalists have the least control over their lives. They don't belong to any groups, are considered outcasts, refugees, and untouchables. They surrender to their fate and don't see reason to try to change it. Some risks are more acceptable. Those that tend to be most accepted practice self-control and are voluntary. Furthermore, pure voluntary risks are associated with challenge and rush of adrenaline. Going to the other extreme, risk amplification are usually imposed and less tolerated. They are considered malign. They can be driven by profit and greed, or in a larger scale, may also characterize terrorism. Adam states that risk is a word that refers to the future. It has no objective existence. The future exists only in the imagination. He goes on by saying that scientists and non-scientists alike do not respond well with uncertainty, and we try to impose meaning on it. He encourages us that we try to stand in the shoes of others, as it is a key ingredient of the empathy essential to effective communication.